Good afternoon. My name is Avreen Pocher, York U alumna and Human Resources Specialist Advisor with the Government of Canada. I will be your host for today's event. Before we start the session, I want to begin by offering York's land acknowledgement. Although we aren't all in the same location, we recognize many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Takaranto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. I want to extend a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us today. For those who are attending a Level Up event for the first time, the Level Up program invites alumni leaders to help new grads navigate life and work after getting their degree, covering subjects like professional networking, career development, and life skills. Today's session is titled Buying a Home in Today's Real Estate Market, definitely topical for many of us. If at any time you need help with this experience, or if you have questions about the content, feel free to click on the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. Our team is ready to help you. Now, I would like to introduce our guest speakers for today, York alumni Daniel and Katie Steinfeld. Daniel and Katie, please turn on your mics and join me on our virtual stage. Welcome. It's so great to have you both here for the session. Before we begin, let me share a little bit more about you both. Daniel and Katie both graduated from York in 2004 with a bachelor's in business administration from the Schulich School of Business. They met during orientation week and since then have become partners in business and in life with 4 children. That's incredible. Katie and Daniel co-founded On the Block Realty, a boutique real estate brokerage operating in the Greater Toronto area. The company has grown to 25 agents working across Southern Ontario, all with the focus of bringing education, transparency, and choice in a constantly changing real estate market. Katie and Daniel are active volunteers in the real estate community. Katie is currently the vice chair of the Real Estate Council of Ontario, and Daniel sits on the board of directors of the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board. Wow, welcome once again, Daniel and Katie. Thanks so much for joining us. How are you both doing today?
Doing well, thanks.
Great.
Thanks for having us today.
Great.
Wonderful. I know that I, for one, am really excited to hear the insights that you have to share with us today, and I'm sure our audience is just as keen to hear from you as well. So why don't we kick things off? Over to you both.
Sabrine.
Thank you. I'm just going to share up the screen here. Okay. Well, it's our pleasure to be here, and we're going to jump right in because I know we're limited for time. We have all kinds of fun stuff to talk about today. I guess I'll just preface this by saying we definitely encourage any questions as we're going. We will leave time at the end for questions, and if we see anything as we're going that we can address in real time, we'll do that as well. But no question is a bad one, so feel free to ask. This is all about educating you all on the process and everything that goes with buying a home in what's a pretty interesting market and anywhere. So I guess before we get started, if we could just run the first poll just to get a feel for where everybody's at in the audience here. We just want to get an idea of where you're at as individuals in your own real estate journey right now, just so we can get a feel for it. And we'll leave this up. I don't know what is standard. What's a standard amount of time? Let's do like 15 seconds. Oh, there's a timer there that's counting up.
Maybe it gives us, I don't know. I was going to say, I thought it only gave us 30 seconds, but everybody's participating, which is great.
Take it as a good thing no one chose the last one, even though I wouldn't be mad at you if you thought this was just a fun way to spend a Tuesday afternoon.
Awesome.
Okay, well, this is just an overview of what we're going to jump into today. Basically going through all the different steps, a little bit about the market, a little bit about what buying is like today, the differences of renting and buying, the process, And then we're going to jump into some more specific stuff and the fun stuff, which is all your questions that we can get to as well. So I will throw it over to Katie, and she can get you all started.
Great. So I'm just going to click share results. I'm not sure if you guys saw the results of the poll.
I did not see it. Oh, I was watching the.
Yeah, I just did share. Can you see that now on the screen? If not, I will read it out just so everybody is aware if you can't see it. It looks like the majority of people that are here today are interested in buying their first home, which is very exciting. 58% of attendees today. And then the rest, 25%, I've bought before, but want to know the current state of the market, which I think a lot of people are wondering about whether they're looking to get into the market or not. And 17% are just here to learn. And nobody thought it would be a fun way to spend a Tuesday afternoon. So you're actually here for a good reason. So that's great. Great. So thanks everyone again for being here. Just wanted to touch upon the value of real estate in Canada. And I know if you listen to the news, you probably hear lots of stories, especially over the last couple of years, of how real estate has performed. We definitely saw a lot of activity over the pandemic, which was definitely not expected for where we were at, but we've definitely seen some consistent inclines. And over the last little while, you can see towards the end of this chart, some steeper inclines in terms of the value of Canadian real estate. So since 2005, Canadian real estate prices have increased on average 6.11% per year on a compounding basis, which we would think is a very good from an investment perspective. Larger areas, which is the areas that we typically trade in the Greater Toronto Area, as well as Vancouver, have seen some larger compounded price growth in the range of 7 to 8%. Given the demand for these areas, immigration coming to the bigger cities is typical as well. So that demand keeps the value of real estate a little bit higher. So we'll go to the next slide. And this just gives you a breakdown by region. If you are looking in the Greater Toronto Area or certain parts of the city, you can see here that overall, all of the areas within the Greater Toronto Area do pretty well from an annual growth rate perspective. So that just shows you Toronto East, West, and Central areas. Central consists of a lot of condos in the downtown core. And then Durham out to the east, Peel in the west end, and then other areas down below. We're seeing rates ranging from just under 6% all the way up over 9% per year.
And I know that this is going back to 96, and keep in mind, this is a consistent growth rate all the way back to that time. So this isn't if we look back at the chart, like it was actually fairly flat, relatively speaking, up until the last 15 or so years. And especially in the last 5 to 10 years, things have just been skyrocketing quite a bit. So despite the fact there's been a bit of a correction in the last 6 months, I can tell you that even since the point of this chart, because interest rates have started to regulate and not be going up as much as they have been, prices are starting a slow incline again, and there isn't any expectation that real estate will be a weak investment going forward, consistent with the way it's been in the past. So we're going to talk a bit about renting versus buying. Now, this might go without saying for some of you, but this is just a little bit of a breakdown of some of the reasons people choose to get into the rental market and the buyer's market. Everybody needs shelter, but people come at it from different perspectives. And again, there's no wrong answer to this, but it's important to understand the reasoning that people have when they make a decision of renting versus buying. Renting is the stuff, if a lot of you are renting right now, I know a lot of you said that you're considering buying your first home. There's things that are appealing about it. Price certainty monthly is a really big thing, knowing how much you owe every month. And in a lot of cases, things like repairs and maintenance being protected and taken care of by your landlord means a lot of those extra costs that come with home ownership can be mitigated or taken away altogether, which gives you some more certainty on what it's going to cost you. That also leads to the fact that you typically will require less money saved up, less leverage, meaning like you don't need to have all this cash sitting around to allow you to make the purchase. And again, the overall cost of it is lower because you're not owning it, you're paying monthly to stay there, which that second point there, the taste test, a lot of people like the idea of trying before they buy. A lot of people, Katie had mentioned, people who are new to the country, people who are new to home ownership or new to having their own place, like to get an idea of location, of types of home, of different living arrangements, things like that. And when you rent, it gives you a short-term commitment that allows you to taste test things and try it before you jump in head first. Now, all that being said, buying comes with its own set of benefits that people are looking for. And it might be some of the stuff you're thinking, as you've said, most of you here are thinking about buying your first home. Probably the number one draw to buying is that it's keeping your money in equity, meaning you're spending money to purchase the home, but your money has now become your home. So the asset is still something you own, meaning that when you pay rent and you pay $2,000 for a month of rent, that $2,000 is gone and you have nothing to show for it. $2,000 in a mortgage payment, notwithstanding that some of it goes to interest, and we won't get into the financial specifics, you own your home, meaning the portion that you've paid down already is something that you continue to own, that continues to appreciate over time, meaning you've got something to show for it. On top of that, you've got things like control, privacy. You get to make the decisions over the place that you own, where that's not as easy often when you're renting someone else's property. And with community and stability, things like being in a neighborhood and planting your roots somewhere long-term, for a lot of people gives you that comfort, where if you're starting a family, if you want to know the schools in the area, things like that, it gives you that community and stability that you can really enjoy. So before I go to the next slide, we're going to jump up with the second survey that now I will share when it's over, because I'm not sure if people can see it or not. We're just going to ask another quick question of everybody. If I control that. Oh, there it is. Okay. So the second question in the poll is an opinion here. Who do you think bought the highest percentage of real estate in the GTA throughout the year 2022? So your choices are investors, domestic and foreign. So that's the sum of the two. First-time home buyers, downsizers, or who are people who are buying a smaller home than where they're at, or move-uppers. Mover-uppers.
Mover-uppers.
The people who are moving into a bigger home. And it looks like we've got a little more, almost 2/3 of you have responded here. We'll leave it open for, oh, okay, it says stop sharing. So we're sharing now. I guess it's over. So 29 of you responded. Overwhelmingly thinking that investors, both domestic and foreign, made up the highest percentage of real estate sales in the GTA in 2022. And then behind that, by a wide margin, first-time home buyers and move-uppers. Interesting, interesting. Don't worry, we're about to answer your question with what is the right answer.
First-time home buyers, surprisingly, they are the majority of current purchasers. 74% of buyers in the fall of 2022 were first-time home buyers. So a lot of interest, and we've seen for ourselves over the last couple of months, definitely a resurgence of interest from people that are looking to get into the market. Some of it has to do with the rise in rent prices and rent costs in the city, but there's definitely a trend for more first-time home buyers looking to get into the market. The demand for detached and larger homes are trending lower, and that's from a more of an affordability perspective. If you've been looking at the market, you know that condos and townhouses are a more affordable option, especially for first-time home buyers as they're getting into the market. And when working with our clients, especially first-time home buyers, it's really about guiding them through more of a property ladder, like taking that approach where you start with a smaller home and build up equity and move up from that point forward. And that's a really great way to get into the market. It might not necessarily be your dream home the first time in, but over time you build up that equity and that savings to eventually get to the home that you're looking for. Average down payment, surprisingly, this is something that surprised me, is 30% overall. And that can reflect back to where the down payment, the source of the down payment is coming from. And so we'll chat about that a little bit later. That doesn't mean that that is the down payment you need when you're purchasing a home. That is just seems to be the average down payment. The average down payment can be as little as 5% with mortgage insurance, which is something we can dive into if people have questions about that later. But again, the average is 30%. Variable rate mortgages are more popular than ever in recent months, which, it seems to trend back and forth based on the interest rates and where things are at. But definitely we're seeing an increase in demand for variable rates. And then interest rate policies and other mortgage policies have had a large effect on the intentions of buyers in the last little while, definitely impacting people's affordability and what they can actually be qualified for to purchase. So these are the things that we've been seeing recently in the market from a buyer's perspective.
Great. And so again, if anybody has any questions about this, you can put them in the chat and we will get to them for sure. There's a lot here and we're dealing with, again, this is averages, like Katie said. I mean, 30% average down payment. It scared us because we don't see a lot of that with first-time home buyers we deal with, but it is in fact the case that on average, people are bringing a lot more money to the table. They just happen to have more saved up. They're coming equipped with that. But again, that doesn't mean that's what's required at all. And that doesn't factor into your ability to purchase a home necessarily. But your own situation will cater into how your search is going to go. So we're going to talk a bit about the process itself, and we're going to jump into it and probably bring up the next survey as we jump into this as well, because this is a loaded slide. We're going to spend a bit of time here talking about the process. But why don't we start with just an idea of what you believe the extra cost should be, so the closing costs, above the purchase price. What should you be prepared with in terms of what the extra costs are going to be? And I'm not going to list off what they are because that might give it away, but we'll talk about it. Jason split. One person is, I don't know if you could see it yet, but one person is very confident that it's nothing. Could be. Okay, we're sharing the results right now. Okay, so more than half of you believe 3 to 5%, 16% over 5%, and that one optimist among you believes it's just the purchase price and you're good to go. Unfortunately, it's not nothing. I wish it was. But in fact, the bulk of you are correct here. And while it does vary, it was shared, right? It says share results. Everybody was able to see those. I'll share it very quickly in case. I think you all saw it though. Yeah, 3 to 5%, the 52% of you, that is an accurate guess. And closing costs, to give you an idea of what that represents, and we might talk about it a bit more later on, things like land transfer tax, which is a huge chunk, although there are benefits to first-time home buyers with a rebate on that. Things like legal costs, moving costs, appraisal costs. There's all sorts of things that go over and above the price of the home itself. And when you're preparing to purchase, you need to be aware of that and you need to prepare for that as well. So this is the process here, beginning to end in one slide of how your home buying process is going to look. The first step here is establishing your budget. The idea is it's best if you've got a mortgage broker, a professional that you work with at a bank, somebody who can guide you along, but getting a pre-approval and understanding what your buying power is pivotal before you dive in to the purchasing process. And I believe there's obvious reasons for that. But if you start looking for things that are outside of your means right out of the gate, not only will you find yourself unsuccessful because you can't afford those places, but you'll also get unnecessarily demotivated right out of the gate when the things you want don't match up with the things you can afford, and vice versa. Sometimes people get over conservative and miss out on things that might be a good match for the things they're looking for. And so establishing your budget and your buying power by meeting with a mortgage broker or working with a real estate agent to connect you with someone who can help you in that sense is your most important first step before you get into the search.
Right. Next is interviewing and selecting the real estate agent you want to work with. It's great to get recommendations from friends and family, from people that they've worked with in the past, but overall, you want to be looking for, you want to be talking to different people because this is a relationship that might last a bit longer. Sometimes it takes a few months for people to find a home. Sometimes it takes people a year. It depends on the budget and what you're looking for, and a lot of different factors go into it. So you want to make sure you're working with somebody that you enjoy working with, but also somebody that is able to work with you and provide you with the solutions that you're looking for.
And in the same way that you're establishing what's important to you in a person you're working with, you need to establish what's important to you in the place you're looking for. This is all before you've even taken a look at a listing. And yes, the fun part is once we get into that during and step 4 there, but it's really important to start to match up step 1 and step 2 to be able to determine what might fit into step 3. What's the most important to you? What are your motivations for purchasing in the first place? Is it an investment? Are you building a family? Are you upsizing or downsizing? Are there locations that are must-haves? Are there features that are must-haves? Number of bedrooms, finished basements, the ability to develop a live-in or a suite for somebody who's a family member who might be aging. This is the step where you need to consolidate as much of that as you can. And it's not to say that this isn't a fluid process as you start to see places, but the more you can establish and prioritize what it is that's most important to you, what it is that's most important you don't have, and what the nice to haves are, it gives your agent the ability to start to formulate a plan for you that keeps you focused. Because even in a market like we're in right now, where supply is really, really tight, there's still thousands of listings out there. And just going off of a price is obviously not enough to determine what might be the best fit for you.
That's right. We did have a question come in that relates well to this process. Is there a difference between reaching out directly to the sellers and maybe finding that home myself, or do I have to, or is it highly recommended to find a real estate agent? That's a really great question. And we would say, when an agent is working with a seller and listing their property, they have that person's best interests in mind through the process. So they're making sure to negotiate favorable terms for the seller. They're protecting their best interests. So if you don't have that same representation, there could be some concern that you might not get the best possible arrangement based on what you're looking for. So it's definitely a personal decision. Some people feel comfortable with the process and think they can, do it on their own. And that's totally fine. But definitely from a first-time home buyer perspective, we would say the guidance of an agent to help review comparables and guide you towards the proper homes and ask the questions that are needed so that you're finding the right type of home is really important. And that's the sort of service that an agent will give you as a buyer.
It's really important to understand the duty of an agent and the responsibility that they have to their clients. Like Katie said, they're responsible to their clients. And if you go to somebody who's not represented by an agent, I mean, it's rare that you see a listing somewhere that is not being listed with the help of an agent. But it's all about making sure you're protected and someone has your best interest in mind to make sure that when you do actually come to a transaction, not only you didn't, fall victim to certain rules or things you might not know about, but also that you've negotiated the best possible price and have an understanding of value so that you're not led into something that might be overpaying at the same time. And I can see a couple more questions. I do know that the recording will be shared afterwards, so that's an easy answer. And mortgage broker, we will talk about that as well. So yeah, how do you find a mortgage broker? We can definitely talk about that as we move on as well. As we move through this time chart, what do you call this? Sorry, you're about to jump in with something there.
No, I was just, we can answer that shortly. We can, for the interest of time, maybe we can just look at that during chunk as one, obviously, piece of the process. And that's kind of the action part where you're going physically out to see properties with your agent. And when ready, you're making that decision to make an offer, which can be very exciting. There's obviously a lot of paperwork involved, and that's the paperwork you want to be reviewing ahead of time so you're comfortable with what you're signing. And the agent's job is to make sure that they're guiding you through and answering any questions you have and putting in the right terms for you that make sense for your particular situation. And that can include conditions that you're making, like home inspection and financing and things of that nature. And then once you have an offer accepted, part of that process is a deposit is given to typically the listing brokerage. It's dropped off to them, and that forms part of your eventual down payment. But in the Greater Toronto area, a deposit is typically anywhere between 3 to 5% of the purchase price. So that's just something to keep in mind, that having those funds available for when you're ready to make an offer, because that is due typically within 24 hours of an accepted offer.
And so there are several pieces to an offer that aren't just the price. Like the deposit is one of those things. The closing date is a very important piece of an offer as well. So you need to be able to determine, first of all, when you'd like to actually be able to move into the home, which is known as the closing date. That's when the deal is finished. It's not the same day you make an offer, and if they accept it, the house is yours. There is a period of time there, and that needs to match up as part of your negotiations as well. And then, as Katie said, the conditions, if there's any, is a very important moving part of every offer. And another reason why it's important to have somebody in most cases representing you, because there are questions that often you'd want to ask, or somebody should be asking on your behalf, to ensure that you're protected and getting what it is that works for you. So the inspection is one example, as Katie had said. You want to make sure that the stuff you can't see is still okay. In a lot of these homes, there's a period of time where, if you've seen in the media, a lot of bidding wars, a lot of people being rushed into offering against a lot of people and maybe not putting conditions in to try to be competitive. Where that does still happen in a lot of cases, conditions are very important to protect you. Financing is another example where you might have a pre-approval from the bank, but in a lot of cases, the bank might want to make sure that the property you're purchasing will appraise and be valued at what it is that you're offering, so that they're willing to, in fact, give you the money that they've said that they could approve you for. These are all part of the questions you need to ask to make sure that you're protected, because signing an offer without any conditions, although it happens often, and if you've got the right advice that allows you to do that, that's fine. Once you've done that, you've bought a house. And in a lot of cases, you might have done one showing that's a half an hour. You might have seen it at an open house, not gone back and made an offer to purchase it. And the next thing you know, it's yours, and you didn't know about certain things you didn't ask about. So once all that is done and you've bought the property, you select your real estate lawyer. Also, we've got resources there, and you can work with agents to find them. There's lots who are out there who specialize in real estate. They will be working with you really closely between the period of time from when you've agreed on a deal to when you close on the home. Lawyers are who typically will manage the transfer of funds when it comes time to closing. They also do things like checking the title to make sure that, in fact, the person you're purchasing from does in fact own the home, and that there's nothing on the title that you need to know about. And they do a multitude of other things. These are all in your best interest to protect you in the purchase. And then the fun stuff.
Great.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about moving. I mean, I guess that's pretty self-explanatory. Moving is just, it's another closing cost, but it's also, that's when things all come together and you get your keys on the day of the closing and everything's fantastic. There's a lot of little moving parts that are in there as well. That's the Coles Notes version. These 10 steps don't happen in 30 seconds, but they can happen very quickly, or they can take a very long time, depending on what it is you're looking for and how the market is looking. So we're going to talk a bit about did you have anything to add there? Or? Oh, okay. Starting lineup. Look at those people.
Yeah. So definitely when you get started, and back to the question that we just received about mortgage brokers. If you don't know anybody, again, it goes back to asking friends and family for referrals. Some people prefer dealing directly with one of the bigger banks. Other people like to work with a mortgage broker who has some flexibility in terms of the different types of lenders they can go to, maybe get favorable rates or favorable terms based on your financial situation. So It's definitely important not only to interview a few real estate agents and get some referrals for those individuals. Same thing goes for mortgage brokers. Your agent might have some great ones to interview, but definitely pick and choose from a selection of different referrals that you get from people. And then the same thing goes for real estate lawyers. When we start working with a buyer or a seller, we do have a list of recommended people that we have worked with in the past. Doesn't mean you have to work with those people, but we've had great experiences with them. And then real estate lawyer is another one that you want to have on hand, because if you do happen to find a home that you really like and make an offer and it's accepted, you want to be able to give the paperwork over to them quickly so that they can start the process of finalizing the sale for you and get you moved into the home. So these are the three main people that you want to kind of have as your starting lineup. And of course, there's other people that we recommend along the way. But as an agent, working with the buyer, that's our job, is to guide you through that process. You're never in the dark in terms of, oh, what's next? What do I have to do? That's, again, our job to make sure that you're aware of that and you're prepared for all of the things that will eventually come your way.
So getting into the other people, there's all kinds of folks that can be part of this team. And it's really just bringing on people who are going to watch every step of what might or might not be needed. So repair people, home inspectors, movers, obviously, depending on the property, you might have to talk with other specialists and people who can speak more to the specifics. Because as people say, as cliche as it is, a home is going to be the biggest purchase you ever make. And so you need to make sure you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's, and working with your real estate agent as the point person to make sure all these people are lined up for you is really important. So we're going to get to questions really quickly. A couple things. I do want to throw the last survey question up as we talk about this as well here. This is just knowing that we're not able to cover everything in a short period of time here, and we want to get to your questions. By all means, reach out anytime. We'll put our contact information on the next slide. But we've got a pretty detailed guide that we can email out to anybody who wants to really jump into all the FAQs, all the different answers, a summary of a lot of the stuff that's here, and a lot more information about the buying process. Anybody who wants that, just fire us an email with the contact info on the next screen, or send us a note through social media, and we'll make sure that you get that. It's not a shameless plug thing or anything like that. This is really just a guide that we give to all sorts of folks who just want more information. The question that's up here, just curious what you think is going to happen in the next year in the GTA real estate in terms of prices. And I'm watching here, it's a bit mixed, although, okay, 100% have answered. I'm gonna, oh no, 100% have answered because you've all answered. I see it. Okay, we're gonna end the poll here. I can see that most of you believe prices are going to go down a bit, which is interesting. They have been going down a bit over the last couple months, and they've sort of flattened out. The nice and scary thing at the same time about real estate is there is no crystal ball on this stuff. So we're not going to give another slide that says, well, here's what's actually going to happen. We can only talk about what has been and what we know about economists are saying. The general consensus is that over the course of 2023, prices are going to start increasing slowly. That is notwithstanding there might be, it's unlikely, but it's possible there's another interest rate hike. If that does happen, it will probably keep prices flat or lower for a bit longer. But that top and that bottom line are very unlikely in the short term, unless there are global events or things that would impact the market in a big way. We've obviously gone through 3 years of pandemic, interest rate hikes, things like that. And so just wanted to get a feel for the room of what everybody thought there. And so before we go to questions, here is how you can reach us. Please feel free to contact us. You can email us there, info@getontheblock.com. You can follow or reach out to either Katie or myself and the brokerage at all those handles at the bottom there. We love to have personal conversations and build on much longer versions of these answers. I do. I'm long-winded. So if you want a short, concise answer, reach out to Katie. If you want a long-winded one, reach out to me. But yeah, and we're happy to take questions.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Daniel and Katie, for that insightful talk. Now we will begin the Q&A portion of today's session. And like you heard from Daniel, to our attendees, we would like to hear from you. So if you have any questions for Daniel and Katie, please use the Q&A text box to submit your questions. Okay, so I think maybe I'll just get us started here while we wait for some more questions to filter in. The first one we have here for you, Daniel and Katie, is how did you get started in real estate?
It's a great question. We, from a career perspective, we saw real estate as an opportunity to, I say flexibility. It doesn't always have flexibility with your schedule, but definitely be able to schedule things out as with a growing family. And we loved the process of helping people with this such a big decision. Real estate has always been something that we've always been interested in. So it was a great natural fit for us. And we've built it to the point of, we're working in the field, but we're also helping guide our own agents that work at the brokerage as well, which has been very rewarding. So we're really happy where we're at right now.
That's great. Thank you so much for that answer. I am just going to turn to our Q&A. I see a few questions have filtered in. So the first question we have is, how do you go about finding a mortgage broker? This individual has an electronic bank and they can't actually physically walk into a branch to locate such an individual. So any tips or advice on that?
Great question. And thanks for your patience. I know you asked that a little while back. I think the short beginning to that answer is a mortgage broker. The nice thing about them is that they don't represent a particular bank. So you're not tied to here's what TD is offering or here's what BMO is offering. They're actually somebody whose main job is to go out there and shop your story to everybody who's out there to be able to present you with the best option, the best scenarios for you when it comes to securing some financing for a property. They're the equivalent of a real estate agent for mortgages is the best way to put it. So in order to find them, one great way, if you're working with a real estate agent, I know like us as an example, we've got a list of recommended partners we trust and work with very closely. And the process is like picking a real estate agent where there's a lot of good mortgage brokers out there, but you do want to be able to mesh and connect with people in a way that you're comfortable with and in a way that you like to work. Some people really like the numbers focused ones who are into analytics. Some people really like someone who's going to sit down and talk about your story, understand objectives a little bit more and dive in that way. But definitely either reach out to your real estate agent for some recommendations, or mortgage brokers are everywhere. They are out there almost in as many numbers as real estate agents are. So you don't need to go into a bank to do it. They're actually out there working for institutions and as entrepreneurs outside of the banks themselves.
Good to know. Our next question is, what guidance can you give on pre-construction condos in the GTA? This particular individual is interested in the Hamilton area.
It's a great question. Pre-construction is one segment that has done very well over the last several years. The pros of this type of purchase is you have an opportunity to get in with a property, and if you're not ready to move right away, you can have an investment and kind of hold that secure for a few years, and hopefully the property appreciates during that time, and then you move in a few years later. There can be delays with the process with pre-construction, which is one of the drawbacks. So we're happy to discuss, the pros and cons if you wanted to reach out to us about that. In terms of Hamilton, there are projects going up, not as often. We found things have slowed down a little bit over this past year, but definitely looking for opportunities. We're happy to guide you through that process. And if needed, we can recommend somebody else that maybe specializes a little bit more in that area. It's definitely not our area of focus per se, but we've definitely helped guide people through that process in the past. And we'll give you the resources to access the right projects.
Perfect. As a follow-up or in relation to that question then, are you also helping with new construction property for rental?
If that's referring to like pre-construction purchases that people are going to use like as investors so that they could rent them out, I assume that's what the question means there. And generally, I mean, I would say half historically or more of pre-construction purchases are people who are using them as investments. And like Katie said, it's a place to have your money hopefully appreciating over time, and you don't need to be paying a mortgage or anything until such time that it closes. And yeah, I mean, the people who we do help with pre-construction projects here and elsewhere, their motivation for it doesn't necessarily determine the approach being any differently necessarily. I think it's understanding what their needs are, what their financial situation is, and their understanding as well. There are rules that are moving targets quite a bit, especially recently when it comes to the intended use of properties, whether it's pre-construction or otherwise, that people need to be aware of before making those purchase decisions, because the government is clamping down, for example, on foreign buyers who are purchasing to not live here, as well as properties that are purchased and sit vacant, and where people are actually purchasing them just to have them appreciate. So it's really important to understand what the goal is and having a strategy and an understanding, if you're investing, in what that looks like financially as well. I think a lot of people believe, and the intent is, I'm going to buy this because the rent is going to pay all my costs once it closes. And what we see generally is that that's not really the case. You're definitely doing well purchasing an investment property, but it's still costing you some money, and your costs are being supplemented a bit by rental, but not positive cash flow in most cases. That's just part of the discussion you need to have when you make a decision like that.
Great note. And I have to say that point about, thinking about laws and all of that, in addition to your own needs, your own budgets, your own timelines, really great note there. Next, then I think I'm going to turn to a question, and that is going to be, would you recommend a fixed rate or variable rate in this market?
It's a question that a lot of people are asking these days. It's a very good question. I wouldn't say it's a hard one to answer, but we've seen, which isn't very normal, that the variable rate has gone higher than the fixed rates in certain weeks, which has been very interesting. While a lot of people prefer or have preferred in the past to take a variable rate mortgage, the fact that interest rates have been going up has been a concern and a risk for a lot of people. As Daniel mentioned before, it looks like there's going to be at least a conditional pause on interest rate increases for now, until we see the full impact of where the economy lands over the next few months. So depending on what your mortgage broker can secure for you on a fixed rate perspective, we're seeing a lot of clients move to a short-term fixed rate. So maybe a 1 or 2 year fixed rate to just hold things for the short term, and then reevaluate in a couple of years when hopefully things have leveled out and there's a better understanding of where interest rates are at. So I think either a short-term fixed is probably the way to go, or if you're feeling a little bit risky and feel like you can kind of hold out for the rest of the year with maybe a bit more, like maybe a slight 0.25 or another half point increase, we should see rates start to decrease in early 2024 if everything remains the same as it is now.
Thank you for that. Moving topics here. Does jumping from home to home every few years to build equity still work in today's market? And how does a first-time buyer start with a small home and work their way to a larger one?
Okay, so the questions are related, but might have slightly different answers. The jumping home to home can work in any market, but you need to be aware of all the costs that come alongside simply buying and selling properties, right? So we talked about the closing costs. Depending on whether it's a home you're living in yourself, there could be an impact of capital gains that can be a big chunk of an impact on whatever you might profit, so to speak, on a home when you jump from home to home. But things like realtor fees when you're selling, things like moving fees, all these different things, land transfer tax of the new place that you're purchasing, simply buying a place for $1 million, selling it for 1.1, and then ultimately, as you continue to buy, you're buying in the same market you're selling in. So you have to be aware that you might be, up, so to speak, and it does work, but you need to be considering what your actual net gain has been, what the impact on your life is, what your end goal is. But that ties into the second part of the question, which is if part of this is also continuing to move up, the best strategy is getting into the market almost without exception. And I know we're an example. Our first home was the first building in Liberty Village. Before it was Liberty Village, it was 50 Lynn Williams. And if you can believe it, that was a condo that cost us, I think it was under $200,000 at the time. I'm dating ourselves, but you know when we graduated, so it's fine. But from there, I mean, with life changes and opportunity, it's really about keeping an eye on where you want to end up and finding the most appropriate path to getting there. So we went from that home to a condo townhome in Etobicoke, and now since then we've moved to a place that's got enough square footage for our stable of children that we've got. And so now we're up in Vaughan, living actually pretty close to York. And it's some of it is luck, some of it is having an ear to the ground. But you need to sort of crawl, walk, run, rather than feeling like you can go 0 to 100. And I think a lot of people get caught up with a lot of these questions and things that haven't even been asked with reality TV and HGTV and $1 Million Listing and the life and how easy it is to make money and all that. And it's a competitive market out there right now more than ever, both between buyers, between sellers. Supply is very low, as you might be seeing. And that means that when demand is high and supply is low, there's lots of people competing for the same property. And so just buying something because it feels like you need to pay something might not always be the best call if your strategy is to make a quick profit, right? Same thing goes for people who want to do quick flips. If people think, hey, I saw on TV, I can buy a rundown home, put in some money, bring Mike Holmes in and the Property Brothers, and they'll fix up my home and it'll be worth another $500,000 and I'll sell it. That can happen, but you might also know like construction costs and material costs and delays are at all-time highs as well. So you've got to consider all the factors, not just the dollar signs that it seems might work. Although it is definitely a thing that people do that with good advice, you can definitely get done.
Great note. And yes, I would say I'm probably guilty of HGTV maybe influencing that perception as well. All right. Our next question is, how do you see the Eglinton LRT and further transit expansion impacting housing in and around those areas?
Yeah, so once those projects, hopefully the hope is that those are constructed and finalized sooner rather than later. But definitely the homes and neighborhoods that are closer to transit, specifically subway access, definitely retain and help grow value over time. So you can really never go wrong with being around those areas, as long as you're willing to maybe deal with some construction in the meantime. And I know that can be easier said than done, but it definitely helps with value.
Wonderful. I think this might be an interesting question that you guys have touched upon a little bit, but some individuals are wondering, how do we prepare for the fees associated with realtors and just closing? I know you also mentioned there can be unanticipated costs, so maybe that factors in a little bit with this question as well.
Sure. So when you're buying, I'm not a fan of realtors who say their work is free when you're a buyer, but you're not explicitly paying your realtor anything. That being said, we did talk about closing costs and a lot of extra things that are out there. You need to, right out of the gate, establish yourself a plan. And you need to understand that if you've been pre-approved for $600,000, what does that look like? Not just with the price of the home, but actually work out. If you're a numbers person, put it on a spreadsheet. If you want the help of your realtor, if you've got people who've been through it before, you need to understand with a contingency planning, if it is en masse about 3% closing fees, take that right off of the number that you're willing to pay for a potential property, right? So work through what you've been approved for and even what a worst case scenario might be, right? Because we do see a lot of times people get into the market and have a number. And if you don't succeed in like week one, the market's always moving as well. And it can be very discouraging if you miss out on a property, or if you're not ready right out of the gate and a month later prices have gone up even 1%, 0.5% in the market, all of a sudden all the stuff you thought that you were looking at, if you're right on the border with your closing costs and with your pre-approval, that might be out of reach already a month later. And so that's not meant to scare you, but it does mean simply asking the question, what do you need to have, is the best way to start. Because a lot of people don't think about that. And how do I prepare? You need to be prepared before you start looking. And not enough people are doing that. Most of the calls we get from buyers are people who saw a home and said, hey, can I put an offer on this? I found a realtor. Can I do this? Or can we go see this? And they haven't asked themselves all those questions. And when we dive into their situation, we realize, well, you know, it might be asking 999,000 and it might sell for 1.2 million. So lots of different moving parts, but it's really just about asking the questions before you get started.
In a similar vein, then, our next question is, what do you need to have for the pre-approval process?
Yeah, so part of the pre-approval process involves confirming your how much you make in a year. So your employment information, that's either through T4 slip or however you can confirm that. You typically go through a credit check to make sure everything's good there. Understanding where you're at with your down payment, so bank statements in terms of what you have in terms of the money. So those are the three main ones. And then, of course, if there's any exceptions or certain things that pertain to your particular situation, they may ask you for further information. But I'd say credit report is something, if you're starting to think about buying a home, take a look at where your credit stands right now. And if you need to make any adjustments, maybe there's a mistake on there that you can get rectified, or you can just start building up your credit. That's another big one, that maybe you don't have a credit card right now. Get a credit card and start building up that credit to get you in a better position to be pre-approved for a mortgage.
All right. And we'll see if we have time for one more question after this, but if not, I'd like to ask, does the buyer's guide you mentioned talk about the different first-time home buyer options, so RSP or other options? And just as a follow-up, is there any other resource you know of that goes over these different options?
Easy one. I don't need to be long-winded. Yes, it's all in there. So yeah, it's a full summary of all the different plans.
Perfect.
And that's a really important thing to know as a first-time home buyer, for sure.
So to our attendees, you can see their contact information on the screen. I think I might just also contact Daniel and Katie about this. It seems like a really great resource to have. All right, maybe just one final question then before we wrap up. Does it ever make sense to put less than 20% down if you have the funds?
Yeah, it comes down to what mortgage rates are at currently and whether you could possibly get a better rate of return for the money that you have under another investment. So it really takes, you want to take a look at where you are at this point in time and explore those different options. So it is an option, and it's definitely something that you want to explore with your mortgage broker.
One thing to jump in, one thing that it's covered in that guide as well, but there is a difference between the deposit and the down payment, right? So I think sometimes people think that putting more down or less down might impact the strength of their offer. It's not the concern of the seller how you're going to finance it, if you can finance it. So don't think that that's going to have any impact on someone's accepting or not accepting, because how you choose to finance is up to you. They just want to make sure you can actually finance it.
Wonderful. You know what? I think I'm going to try and squeeze in one last question here, just because the answers you guys are giving are so valuable. I guess our question, the final one for today, will be, how does refinancing work and how can I plan for using it?
So refinancing is when you currently own a home and you want to take the equity that you've made out of it since you've purchased it. So over time, as we've shown you in that chart, your home will likely generate more equity. You do have the option of taking that equity out and then use that to either refinance for another purchase, or maybe a project that you have in mind. You want to redo the kitchen or things like that. So those are definitely options that you can take if you want to explore that.
Wonderful. Okay, so we'll wrap up the Q&A with that then. What a great session. Thank you so much for our attendees as well for joining us today. And before we let you go, Daniel and Katie, do you have any final words of wisdom to share with our alumni audience today?
Wanna go
Both
ahead, Dan?
pausing for the other to jump in there. Honestly, keep asking questions, stay curious, don't be discouraged by what you see in the media. It can be really easy to fall victim to headlines. Headlines are there they're not false, but they're there to get you looking and thinking and reacting. And I find that sometimes it can influence people in a way that's not in line with reality, and everybody's situation is different. So regardless of where you might think your situation is, don't get discouraged until you've asked people questions. Talk to professionals, try to weed out the neighbors and what they're telling you. and and really just if it's something that's a goal of yours, I truly believe anybody can be a homeowner with the right plan. It might not be in the next 2 weeks, but you've got to start planning for it. And it is a difficult market to buy in. That is a headline that's true, but it's not impossible. And those who are putting themselves out there and really trying and asking the right questions are going to be successful in it. So good luck to everybody and reach out anytime.
Yeah. And you've all taken the first step of learning more by attending this session. So we really appreciate everyone's time and amazing questions. And yeah, reach out to us anytime if you have any other questions.
Well, once again, thank you so much, Daniel and Katie. This was an incredible talk. I will just advise you that you can now turn off your microphones. And to all of our other attendees, this marks the end of our session for today. I hope you found today's session helpful, and we look forward to seeing you at more of our Level Up events. We also encourage you to join our LinkedIn group or follow us on Facebook by searching York University Alumni and on Instagram and Twitter at YorkU Alumni. Feedback about this or any of our other programming is welcome and can be sent to us on our social channels or at alumni@yorku.ca. Thanks so much again for joining us today, and we hope to see you all again very soon. Take care, everyone.